Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our special meeting tonight. This was supposed to be our study session that was going to be done last week. And there is something that's echoing. If we could check all the speakers, if I could get someone to help out and check to make sure all of the speakers are on. But tonight was supposed to be our study session. We moved it to the special meeting. And we just have a couple items on the agenda, but I did want to welcome our guests in the audience today. We have Allison Mallow, teacher over at Ridge Central. We have Megan Nothnagel, principal over at Central, and we have Kelly Moore, math coach, as well as Demetra Georgianis, our assistant principal, and Sammy's floating around somewhere. So welcome, everyone. And I will turn that over to you for public participation.
Sure. So I'm just going to ask to see. Does anybody have anything here? Yes. Does anybody have anything they want to say?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, go with it.
All right, so we're going to jump right into one of our main parts of tonight, and that is the presentation on the math pilot. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but I also have Demetra, who has been spearheading this for 2.5 years now. Along with Kelly Moore, our math coach over at Ridge Central, and Jen Talby also was involved in putting the presentation together, but was unable to be here. She's our math coach over at Ridge Lawn. So before I turn it over to them, I wanted to point out again, we started this back in 2019, and we had piloted a couple things. We were looking at a K-8 pilot at that point. We were really split at the elementary level, couldn't find anything that we thought was the right fit for us at that time. And, but we did find it for 6th through 8th grade, and that is illustrative math. They have been working on that for 2 years now. Obviously last year was so broken up, it was hard to really judge anything. But I do know in talking with our junior high teachers, they've been very happy with the choice of that pilot. So then we kind of took last year off, which made a lot of sense to take off from doing a pilot. Things were crazy enough. We wouldn't get, I thought, any data that would be accurate at all. So it stepped up again this year, where we piloted both illustrative math, which was not available the first time we went through this for K-5, as well as bridges, which we had also looked at in the original pilot. I'll be very upfront. This was a very polarizing pilot. We had people with very strong opinions on both sides, really dependent sometimes on the grade level. So there is, they did a really nice job of collecting all the data and talking about it. There definitely was not a consensus, and that's where it comes up to really myself and talking with people of what that recommendation is going to be. So we'll be sharing out the presentation along with that tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Demetra and Kelly, and they're going to kind of go through it. Please feel free to ask them any questions at any point. And they're going to try to share their screen so everyone on the live stream can see that as well. Sam, is the microphone on? And you should also unmute yourself if that's possible. Actually, if you just unmute yourself, you should be good. I wouldn't even use the microphone.
Hi, my name is Kelly Moore. I'm coach over at Central this year. We've been working on a pilot since the beginning. And one of the programs that we piloted was the illustrative math. And there was 3 really good reasons why we thought that this was good for our students. One different reason behind the why was that it's a problem-based curriculum. It gives the students the opportunities to have an invitational and accessible entry point. They work on activities by themselves in groups as well as in groups, and they can take various approaches to problem solving. In addition, it helps the teachers ensure students understand the problem from the start without giving away the punchline. So it's more based. Synthesize learning at the end of each activity and lesson. So once they get through all of the lessons. Second reason, or number 2 reason, is its overarching design. Each unit or each grade level has a unit level, a lesson level, and then an activity level. The overarching design, which is part of that second reason, you'll notice that there are 2 different designs, one for the K1 as well as the K5. Both have a warm-up, so they all give a warm-up, which would be your number 12, your math club. Then they go into activities. There's either going to be an activity, there's an activity 1, an activity 2, and then the synthesis that kind of wraps it up. And then, which leads into the lesson synthesis. The only difference, the big difference between the grade 1 or K1 and K5 would be the cool down and the centers are embedded within the 60-minute lessons. And the centers for the K5 would be on a separate day, or it could be optional as well. So they have like a lesson set aside just for a Sunday day for K5. Our third reason, which is another nice component of this program, is that it has an equal balance of the mathematical proficiency. So it's a combination of the conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, and the applications of the math. Finally, diving deeper into the structure of a lesson, there's an invitation to mathematics. So that would be one example, which one doesn't belong. So it kind of gets something that's their warm up, which would lead into the activities, which would be that middle section, the deep study of concepts and the procedures. And then there'll be a second activity that follows the first activity. And then the synthesis. And then finally, they consolidate and applies, which ramps that down and has to cool down. So almost every day there'll be a like an activity. So immediately you'll know if your students are getting it or not getting it.
Thank you, Kelly. And I'm going to talk about the positives and some challenges for IM, just Western mathematics. Some of the positives, you'll see plus signs next to positives. Each lesson displays alignments of standards, and there are standards-based options and opportunities in there. All lessons include built-in supports for the English language learners and students with disabilities. Most lessons have extensions as well for students who are ready to go more deeply into the math. In the past, we haven't had this option to have math talks embedded into the curriculum. So this is a really nice option where it's integrated into each lesson, where we don't have to pull from the outside and embed it. And then there's a continuity, as Dr. Florence said. The 6 through 8 has adopted it, and so that could be a positive as well, where it's continuous from kindergarten all the way through 8th grade. A challenge that has been brought up is that there's not enough skills practice problems. Some teachers also felt that their students were engaged, while others felt embarrassed work, and so those are some of the challenges that this program that we got feedback from. Here's an actual review from a pilot teacher. The program is set up similarly to Think, Share, Share, and students have a definite progressive struggle when it comes to tackling the problems. The students have been very successful working on problems on their own, and then have used to problem solve and collaborate together. Another review, the lessons contain a real life situation for each lesson. Last week we were rounding decimals, an example was from luge. I was able to show you a clip from the Olympics and pause at the timestamp to talk about why we need to leave luge to the thousands. and round other data to the hundreds, tens, or full numbers. As far as bridges goes, there are 3 integrated components: the problem and investigation, which covers the direct instruction portion, and that includes problem strengths, math form, and small group opportunities. Workplaces is another integrated component, and that is engaged in activities for small groups of peers. And number corner, which we've actually adopted, that's an additional component that could be used as a standalone, and we have been using that this year with a lot of positive feedback on that. So that's really building our number science for our students. That is a district math goal, and so we thought that would be a great way to touch on that. We've also been integrating 5 common assessments. We're looking at the see if we are going over. Some positives and challenges, very engaging lessons, invite rich conversations, and opportunities for collaboration. Each lesson displays alignment to standards. Some challenges, the lessons are long and often not able to be completed in one day. And there is specific vocabulary that Bridges uses, which that seems to be a negative feedback, because if we're going to shift to IAM, then that language will be different. And some reviews from the pilot teachers. The series spirals, assuming students are familiar with the terminology. I liked how there were both suggestions to go with the lessons. Also, there were many ways for students to collaborate. And in my experience, lessons have taken much more time to complete than indicated.
Yes, this really brings us to what the recommendation is, and again, we need to be very upfront that it was split when we did the pilot, and I think there's very strong viewpoints on each side. But for us, it really comes down to Bridges. Looks like a phenomenal curriculum. It has tons of stuff, but it is very, very specific to Bridges. It is a curriculum that basically, if you're not understanding or following exactly what Bridges said, sometimes it's hard to apply that in other areas. And we see that as being a pretty big challenge for our district. The other thing with illustrative math, it has a really, really strong foundation. And we now have some really good supports in our district to build off that strong foundation. We have 2 math coaches. After this evening, we should have a curriculum director. So people who are going to be able to work with our staff to build off of that strong foundation. If this was 4 or 5 years ago and we did not have that support, I can see us possibly going in a different direction. I think what we see with illustrative fits our district very well. And again, having that continuum from K through 8, I think is definitely a positive. And the other thing I know, and it wasn't a ton of people, but we did have some parents who were very, very frustrated with the Bridges program as they were working, trying to help their kids. And obviously, anytime you're starting something brand new, there is going to be some of those challenges, but we did receive some of that feedback as well. Yes.
Okay, first of all, it looks like it's a very strong format. Format.
It is very similar.
That's different things that they do, like set up, so that once they start that kindergarten, so they'll know what to do, it's just they can just pay attention to them.
Yeah, the structure is very similar. You just may not have the centers in the junior high.
As well as the like activity 1, so it goes with the warm up, and then activity 1 is normally like the standards from a previous year.
Right.
And then activity 2 dives deep into current standards. So it's almost like it's always reviewing
So
back.
you get a review,
Right.
and then you learn something new, and then there's a couple of issues after that.
Yes.
Okay.
Like
so
activity
then it
1,
just
activity
keeps building every
Yes.
day.
Right. Right.
And
And
then
then
you said
rapid declaration.
there's tests and the tests.
Well, there's cool downs daily
Yeah.
for mainly for 2 to 5. K, they're not doing cool downs. 1, they're kind of embedded within. And in first grade, they're throughout. They don't do it on a daily basis. And then at the end of each unit is broken up into about let's say 15 to 20 lessons.
Okay.
It varies. But with about every 6 to 8 lessons, there's a unit assessment. And then that's when it goes from like part A to part B. Part A would be your prerequisites. And then part B is your content. And then the final part is like the wrap up of the entire.
So there's checkpoint quizzes and then an end of the unit.
So you'll be able to tell now, right, tell the conservative, those standard-based scorecards, and then be able to stay on top of whether or not these kids have accomplished the standard as they learn it.
Yes. The
Yes,
standards
with
are there
the-
for each.
Everybody, like, they don't have to start digging through everything right away. You know,
The standards are embedded in each lesson.
so that they can be able to transfer that to the center.
One of the other things I want to point out, we have been working through creating common assessments in math. And if you talk to any of our teachers, we went through it, and even our math coaches and Demetra, our first time did not go great. And it's part of that learning. I mean, it was like taking some kids 3 days to complete these common assessments. I think our second round went a lot better. And so trying to really get to the point where that just becomes a natural thing, kind of checking in where everyone is against those standards.
And if that's gonna continue for each grade, then, you know, it's just once they get it, and it's there. So,
I have a couple questions. So I heard what you guys said. The PowerPoint, aside from teacher comments, was a lot of jargon. I feel like someone listening to it, hearing standards and all these things, I really want to know what you guys think. There's clearly a deficit testing wise math in our district, like kids have struggled and our test scores show. Before pandemic, our test scores show. So, I mean, I remember when we adopted the math in the junior high, it was like super positive, and one of the questions was continuing it. I think it's great to have it connected. I don't like the fact that Bridges might have taught things that you couldn't use another way, like it shouldn't be a magical formula. I just want to know from your guys' like honest perspective, what are the changes that you've seen kids have with this? I know number sense was really supposed to help with that idea where kids just didn't get the numbers, they couldn't understand it. I remember that's when we adopted that. So that with this, what are like positive changes to spend all this money again on another program? Why this? Like from your guys' perspective, not from it means invitation to math, cool down. Like sometimes when teachers are saying they can't get the lesson done in the time, they get to the how are we using, I guess, the differentiated lessons within a regular lesson? And I don't even know what a math talk is. So I just want you guys to like put it, I'm not a math person, so I would love to know just in your own words. Sure.
So a math talk is basically an open-ended, it could be numbers, it could be pictures, it could be patterns. So it's basically different. There's not going to be one answer. So the children are going to kind of look at something for a minute, and they're all going to have that ability and opportunity to say what they think is going on in the picture of the number. And that's what kind of gets them warmed up. That's why it's a warm up. And with that, it kind of gives them a little bit more confidence, because pretty much every answer is an answer. And it gives them that confidence to then not be fearful when it comes down to a lesson. So that gets them talking, thinking, and then as well as listening to others who have a different perspective, and then thinking, oh, I didn't see it that way, but I see what they're thinking as well. So that's that transfer of, there's not just one way to get to that answer, which should then bridge over into the regular lessons and the learning of their standards, because they're going to realize they don't need to do it one way. They can kind of come up with that way, what works best for them. So that's where the math warm up or number talk comes into play.
Yeah, and so if you have 35 plus 12 on the board, and you ask students, come up with your answer mentally. So we're trying to build that. And then students will give you different ways of breaking down those numbers. And you write that down on the board with their name next to it. They feel very confident and happy about that. But then the other students, like Kelly mentioned, are listening to that and they're learning these different strategies of how students are thinking. So it's really the metacognition piece that is super important for that. And it's also for the teacher, you're gathering a lot of observational data on that of how students learn best. So
It's
that's
truly fascinating
Yeah.
to listen to them too,
No,
at all ages.
I get it, because my kid will have a problem, it's like, oh, add the 2 and the 2 to make it 30 plus 10, and then add the 4. So I do see, and when I was little, it was, you just added it on the down. So it's nice to see that there's different ways of doing it, and then that's being incorporated. I think it's great with the continuity piece, because, you know, some teachers are like, oh, you have 4 points. And then for the next grade, like, it's not the same. So if we're all using the same language, I can see that the grammar school. But has anyone used the outward versions and implemented it in our vast population, or even tried other parts of it with special needs?
Yeah, so we did have 2 special education teachers on board. They did do the best that they could with both curricula, but it was a little more challenging for them. So I know we talked about them possibly using another curriculum that they felt met the needs of those students better, but then also providing IM as a piece that they could pull from and use.
They felt it was a good segue if one student was going to go from, you know, be more mainstream into a regular math classroom. They felt that that would be a better segue for them.
And as far as DL goes, we did not have any pilot teachers that were DL teachers, but there are, within each lesson, there are DL supports in there. So it's not like a separate piece.
Did you guys notice this improvement in student differences? I mean, you're like kind of a, I mean, obviously you're the coach, but that is your kind of thing. I'm not talking about that before.
I think it's going to take more time, you know, to see that pan out.
So, I mean, this is
It's
really,
only 1 year, I get it.
well, and it's 1 year that's been split between 2 curriculums. So it's, and I think the biggest thing with any program is going to be that professional development for the teacher to really understand it. So.
But really our goal and what we've noticed in the scores and the data is we get this kindergarten through second, that's great, and then we have a huge drop in third. And that's been historic. So what we've talked about even as school improvement teams and amongst us is that we think that they are not getting that real true understanding from those primary grades. They're just doing as they're being told to do. And so they see the teacher teach them, they're just regurgitating that. And so we're hoping that they really get a solid understanding of the conceptual piece when they're little, so they really understand what they're doing with the math, and then build off of that with the procedural and with the application.
And I think one way I always think back to it, I don't know about you, but my math teachers always said, you need to know this because you're not going to have a calculator with you at all times. Obviously, we all do. And so when we were in school, it was memorize and understand those facts. And I still think those have a really important place in math. But what we are trying to get students, especially younger, is to understand the why behind it. And that's, you talk about some of the amazing discussions you have when it like finally clicks for them. It's pretty amazing.
No, it's something that never changes, building on, you know, they start a little bit stuck up in the person. It's building on top of each lesson. I mean, that's never changed. They didn't even have a couple of years.
I have a question. For the IM says there's not enough skills practice problems. Is there a way to get more if you see someone is struggling with
Yeah,
it?
that is a
Picking it up.
challenge. So that would be a supplement. We have to supplement skills practice, but it's easier to supplement the skills practice. You know, there's a lot of different resources that we have built, and I know that the math coaches have been working really hard at even formulating you know, to help with each lesson and to embed those within that lesson plan template. And so that definitely is something that we have heard from others and from us.
And also, do we know if there's how well this transfers from K through 8 and then into their high school? Because I know that's I've seen parents commenting how they don't feel like some of the lessons and some stuff that they're learning
Skills are matching.
are transferring over into, the public high schools that they're going to, or into.
I'm not sure what Richard-
Yeah, and I don't know off the top of my head what Richards has right now, but what I will say is that when you look at our scores and where they are in math and where they have been historically, I don't think no matter what program you had, I don't think you can say it would transfer over well when you go to the high school. So really trying to make sure we build that foundation all the way through. And then the hope would be that they'd be ready for whatever program Richards has at that time, because they understand the larger picture of the math concepts. Good question. Yes. Yes.
And they do.
Yes, I know they have been now.
Yeah.
That's the.
They have
The English has it all figured out. Yep.
These two kind of spoke on the questions I have, but I just want to clarify, so the sped teachers that you said piloted, were they solo teachers or were they co-teachers?
Solo. We had a third grade and a fourth.
And then she asked about math talks. Did you answer that?
So, yeah, I could say that.
Yeah, okay.
So that's a warm up, really.
That's it.
Yeah, and it's really just tapping into the brains of the students to see what types of strategies how their brain is working as they're breaking down.
Okay, all right.
And that's.
Yeah.
Oh, so I'm not in education, so with the program, is it all like what the school is getting? Is it all online? Is it like workbooks? Are there multiple components,
Yeah.
like anything where kids are struggling and they can do more on their own, like incorporated in it, or like just instead of setting to go along with standardized stuff? So then along the way, teachers like pause and they can tell like absolutely know what's getting it, or half of getting it.
So there are some cumulative practice problems that is offered. So just so you know, there's two vendors for one is Time to Punch, which is the one we piloted, and that is because the other one was Learnzillion, and now it's Imagine Learning. I guess they must have bought them out literally recently. But we did not go with the Learnzillion because that was all it was like all tech driven. So we went with the hard copies and the hard books. So there's a teacher's manual, there's a teacher's resource book, and then the student book. As far as the word bank of problems, they're embedded in the lessons, but that's part of the skills practice problems that it is lacking. I'm just going to be very honest with that. It is lacking with those practice problems and those skills practice problems. They also don't have homework within the curriculum. That's just a philosophy of theirs. So that would be something that we would have to supplement if we were to look into offering the homework as extra checks, because that can be those skills practice problems.
A lot of teachers probably forget stuff.
That's exactly what I said.
Mhm.
Well, Nancy had just indicated teachers have that stuff, but I mean, obviously for teaching a concept, there's lots of avenues, not just the curriculum. I don't know any teacher who's in high school, not grammar school, who goes straight off the curriculum. I feel like you have like the world at your fingertips and sharing best practices and asking, sage teachers, like what's something that I could use to help with this, so.
Well, and that's again, when I pointed out, we have a curriculum director
Yeah.
and math coaches to really help support that. Because the last thing we want to do is teachers kind of say, well, this is the direction I'm going with this. We have one fourth grade teacher doing it this way now, and one doing it this way. And we really just need to do what's best for kids. So I think that support is there for them.
And I don't know if I answered your question with that extra practice piece, but yeah. We have so many different, like Khan Academy and Purple, and there's so many resources that we have embedded in Google Classroom for students to practice on, and you can actually assign to those. So that's where the textbooks could come in as that extra practice, but also hard practice.
With running this program, cut out anything that we have like a subscription for that wouldn't need to be for anymore. I know that we have.
Yeah. So that is something honestly that we will be reviewing this summer with our curriculum director and looking at all of our programs and whether or not they fit, not only whether you're changing something, but even if it just fits in the philosophy of the district. We've talked about really needing to pare it down and figure out what works. Like less could be better if everyone knows the information about it.
COVID has really find things where students occupied and technology focused. There's only one person in charge of all that stuff.
If you wanted to add a component where everything that you see hard copy is accessible online, there is something called PIDA, and it would be $27 per student for that. And that has everything that you see on hard copy, but it also allows teachers to share plans and rate and edit and actually ask for feedback from students. So maybe if something's absent, you know, you want to assign it online, you could do a lot of that, but that would be an additional. And they could go into school.
And there's things on Kendall Hunt that goes right into Google Classroom as well.
Can you guys? Yeah. Oh, okay.
Per student per year. Every year.
It's great, give them 25 minutes. They might go off.
I assume it's fine. But they didn't even teach me how to use that at that level right now.
Have you seen them get away from it?
Personally.
In a couple of years where, you know, it was nice, but now you can't.
And the materials, we'll have some here at the district office, not only if any of you want to continue to look for it, but anyone who's watching or who would like to see it. We would like to move forward and ask for approval next board meeting, which is a week from today. And the reason we try to really do that in March is to give us time to order the materials with the hope that they will be here before school gets let out, so that people have them. So
And then we get to professional development.
when we come back, yes.
Right in May, or June of 2020.
I thought you did this.
It was on, it was like a Tuesday. And throughout the year, this year, I've done different workshops and they do have an on demand right on the Kendall Hunt website. So you could, like anybody log on and
They need some help.
right. I mean, those are the more on demand things that, you know, over the last few months that they put out there. And then they some of the recorded versions up there a little bit, so. And those are free, yeah, when they're on.
Okay. But the rest of the teachers will have professional, all, everybody
Yes,
teaches
K5,
math.
yes, yeah. And if there are no more questions for Kelly or Demetra, I again just want to take a chance to thank them. This has been the longest pilot ever, as well. And I know we have a lot of people watching, but as well as all the teachers on there who put in a lot of work. It's not easy to pilot. A lot of times you're very comfortable in what you're doing, and then you're asked to completely learn something new with no guarantee that that will continue. So I just really wanted to thank everyone for putting in all the hard work. So.
Yes, thank you so much.
Right. And then we are going to adjourn to closed session. So we are going to adjourn to closed session for the purpose of the discussion of the appointment of an employee, as well as compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employee of the public body or legal counsel for the public body. And that is what we'll be talking about in closed session. Can I get a motion to go into closed session? Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Grove. Mrs. Lammel. Aye. Mr. Malkowski. Absent. Ms. Choi. Mrs. Labudzik.
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer. Mrs. Salzer.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.